Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is glad to have an opportunity to have a discussion today in the format of what we call in FAO Forestry Technical Network, which is a format encouraging and supporting professional dialogue between different members of the FAO expert community, both here at headquarters in Rome, but also in the country offices and in the regional offices. And we are really excited and happy to use this opportunity to be part of the visiting delegation from Georgia, from the Republic of Georgia, representing the National Forest Inventory project that is now being implemented in the country with support from the German government. And we have FAO has traditionally had a very strong and technically rich role with countries and globally in developing and advancing the most up-to-date methods of national forest inventory, forest monitoring, forest accounting, and assessments at the national level and feeding up to the global forest resource assessment process, FRA. So we are very happy that the process in the country, in Georgia, which is supported on a bilateral basis by the government of Germany, now also has a reason and the need to tap into the FAO global expertise on these matters. And I see this as a very important, mutually beneficial process. And I very much hope and look forward to this bringing us even further closer together in collaborating in Georgia on the issues of forest information and forest decision-making supported by the right information systems. So we have a relatively short session today under the aegis of the Forestry Technical Network of FAO, which we have called in a somewhat engaging manner, National Forest Inventory of Georgia, seeing the bigger picture behind the trees. And that's the kind of invitation that I have to all participants here to use this opportunity to have a bit of a constructive debate. So not just state, we are working on this project, we are working on that project, and just leave it like that, but challenge each other's assumptions and trying to broaden our respective viewpoints to see connectivities and some maybe blind spots in our respective views, which we can collectively address much more effectively. So with this, I guess we'll see at the end how we were successful in actually seeing the forest behind the trees. But here we have a combination of, I guess I don't think we should spend time introducing everyone here because it's more like a seminar as opposed to a official meeting type. So we have here essentially two main presenters. One is our own Marco Piazza. Where is he? Right there, yes. Who will present the general overview of what FAO, the Forestry Department of FAO, does in that sphere on national forest monitoring assessments in relation to both the kind of general forest information process, but also to REDD+ and climate change mitigation and adaptation. And then we have the main presentation by Mr. Pato Torcinava, who is a very old friend and colleague of mine from my own Georgia days, and I'm glad that he is here and he brought the team here. And he is a project leader. I may have mispronounced your correct title, but you are leading the project, the GIZ supported project in Georgia on national forest inventory. So with these two presentations, then we really want to leave time to some interaction and discussion and actually trying to see the bigger picture behind the counting sticks, as they say, or counting carbon sticks, as some people say. So, I've also specifically asked another colleague of ours working in the forest governance and economics team, Ilias, who's been one of the leading forces behind the new, very promising development that FAO is doing jointly with other partners on developing national socioeconomic surveys in forestry. And so you would probably also have a chance to briefly speak about what this work is about and how it can actually connect to the traditional national forestry inventory work, and where some convergence paths are, where we can start looking more effectively at the forest, not just as a collection of carbon sticks or cubic meters of wood, but to a broader underlying element of sustainable development with its socioeconomic, social, and other impacts. So with this, I welcome again everyone to this event. And Marko, the floor is yours now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the NFI Georgia delegation. We've been working for already 2 days, and we will continue towards until the end of the week. Within the context of this seminar, I'd like to share a few slides on the work that we do at FAO, and in particular in the team of National Forest Monitoring and REDD+. My name is Marco Piazza, and I'm part of this team since a few years. So I will not take too much time because the main presentation is the next one, but I will just share a few slides on this topic. Forest monitoring has a long history at FAO, as many people know. Basically, FAO, since its creation, started to keep track and try to assess the extent of forest at the global level through global reports that are published every 5 years. And the program is already quite well known and famous, and still alive and kicking, and due to continue in the future. At the same time, FAO has provided national support to countries with a specific area of a national forest inventory. In particularly, since the year 2000, a specific program was created within the Forestry Department to give direct support to countries. This was a need that emerged from the fact that many countries until 10, 15, 20 years ago simply didn't have enough data to report to the international conventions or to the FRA, for example. And so that was the idea of actually creating a program with a team in direct support to countries for their national forest inventory. Forest monitoring has evolved through time. It changed connotations a little bit towards as the years went by. At the beginning, it was more focused on timber inventory. Of course, the main point was to assess how much timber is standing for the timber industry. So it was a purely commercial and industrial type of inventory. As years went by, in the 80s and 90s, topics like biodiversity and socioeconomic information became more important, had a greater relevance, and so they were introduced also as part of the National Forest Inventory. And then more recently, with the challenges that we are facing with the climate change, of course, the carbon content in our forest became also a very big topic, and this is what's driving most of the work that we are doing currently. All this work, of course, with the overriding objective to strengthen the national capacity in monitoring their forest resources, and with the overriding motivation that better information leads to better decisions, which leads to better actions in the forest sector. Of course, in order to develop policies, in order to develop management plans, we need to have what we have and how much and where and what is the nature of the standing forest. So this has been the objective. Some of the key principles that have been driving our work, of course, is national ownership. We support the countries, but the countries maintain the ownership of the process, the ownership of the data. We are very much into this direction of the countries are the real leaders of this process, even if we give a support. In more recent years, we try to support methodologies and an approach that is in line with UNFCCC. We propose a stepwise approach, meaning you can start small and then develop through times, making the process even more accurate and more comprehensive. We always try to build on existing capacities without reinventing the wheel. Many countries already have some data. Many countries have a system already in place. So we work on top of that. We work on something that already exists if it exists. We try to promote the use of open source and freely available data and tools. We will talk about that in a couple more slides. Again, strengthening national capacities, trying to enhance the cross-sectoral approach. As much as possible, we try to stimulate the dialogue between different ministries, different departments of agriculture, forestry, environment, so that all the stakeholders, all the groups that have an interest in collecting and then using the data that emerge from a national forest inventory, they can get together and benefit in a mutual way. This is, of course, this means knowledge sharing. As much as possible, we try to also promote the collaboration between countries. Some countries that have gone through an NFI, they have a lot of experience and they can be very useful for another country that is just starting the work. And then the last point, we always try to promote the concept of a sustainable NFI, something that can be repeated and something that can be institutionalized within the budget, within the policy of a country. So it's not something that should happen once, but something that has the nature of a monitoring process that is repeated in subsequent years. In our current context, the main work that we do is in support to REDD countries on establishing a national forest monitoring system. So NFI is one pillar, one component of what we call a national forest monitoring system. The other components are a satellite land monitoring system, so with the use of remote sensing, the development of a greenhouse gas inventory, and the development of forest reference levels. So these are all components, and we have experts here at headquarters and also in the countries that are leading this work on these other thematics. At the same time, we should not forget the main mandate of FAO, which is to support countries, to support member countries as they request. So regardless if they are interested in they are REDD Plus countries or not, we try to respond to any sort of need. And one example is the Georgia delegation that we don't have yet an official project with them, but they advanced a request and we responded and provide training and support as needed and as requested. These are some numbers. So as an overall team, we provide support and capacity building to over 70 countries with global, regional, and national programs in all the three areas that I mentioned before, NFI, SLMS, and FREL, and greenhouse gas inventory. Of course, these numbers are very big, but it's not just us here at the headquarters, but we have a lot of colleagues in the regional and national offices that, of course, support our work. I listed here a few of the donors that make our work possible. I'd like to mention the government of Finland, for example. We just started a big project in Myanmar, NFI project in Myanmar with Finnish funds. European community supported most of the work in Papua New Guinea. USAID is supporting Bangladesh. World Bank, through the FCPF program, is supporting many NFIs in Africa. And many others, of course. These are some of the tools that I mentioned before. We promote, so we are promoting, and constantly developing a set of tools that support our work for data collection, analysis, and reporting. The overall suite is called Open Forest. And we have software for all phases of an NFI, from designing the survey to collect data and to analyze. And a more recent one is CEPAL, which is supporting cloud-based processing for remote sensing activities and work. When we can, if we have some time left, we try to make some publications. Here's a list of a few recent ones and some of the forthcoming. I like to mention at least two, which are more pertinent in our context here. The Voluntary Guidelines for National Forest Monitoring, which was released just a few months ago, and the Knowledge Reference for National Forest Assessment. In these publications, we try to compile some of the guidelines or some of the experience that we have developed, that we have learned. One point is also when we work with countries, we are providing support, but we're also learning a lot from the countries. Every time we learn, and so we try to compile this knowledge into some publications which are listed here. With specific regard to a national forest inventory, we provide support to all the phases that compose an NFI. In some cases, even from the very beginning, from the project proposal to approach donors. For sure, since one important phase at the beginning, the information needs, trying to understand what type of data a country is particularly interested. Development of a methodology, then the biggest step, which is the implementation, which means actually going in the field and collect data. There's a lot of, it's a big logistical effort. The setup of an information system and data collection and data management, analysis and reporting. I put an arrow looping back because this should be seen as a cycle that continues. So what we can learn a lot from the data that we collect from the reports, and these results should be the ones that drive the implementation of the next phase. Because we can learn from what we collected, and so the next time around we can adjust, or we can learn from what we have collected in the first time. Just a couple more slides, because sometimes I even ask myself, or we ask myself, okay, why is this important? Why is it important to do an NFI? So, of course, in our context, as I said before, the main work is seen as an NFI as one of the pillars to meet the requirements of a UNFCCC to make the country progress from REDD+ readiness to result-based payments. An NFI is also important for international reporting, but I like to emphasize the fact that we always had a very holistic interpretation of NFI, multi-purpose, in a multi-purpose sense. So it's not just about carbon, it's not just about timber, but it's also about biodiversity, health, and socio-economic. So we try to include this component as very important during an NFI process. So some of the key questions that we try to address while starting the national forest monitoring are, okay, where are the forests? What is the extent and the composition? What is the status in terms of health condition? Are the forests being used? By who and how? Who are the actual users and the people who directly benefit from the presence of forests? Can we identify some changes or some trends in the forest characteristics? Can you identify indicators or drivers of these changes? How accurate and precise are the estimates? So these are all questions that we ask ourselves before we design a national forest inventory. Lastly, I'd like to list a few favorable conditions. I have been in this field for a few years, so I have seen some of the developments that have occurred in this sector. So we have, of course, accumulated a lot of experience. As I mentioned before, we provide training, but just as much we get feedback from the countries. We learn a lot from working with the countries in different contexts. So we have accumulated an experience, and so this is definitely an asset that we have. There are new technologies available for both remote sensing and field data collection. Satellite images are becoming more frequent with a higher resolution and lower cost, sometimes free. So these are all positive points that we can benefit from. We can use web-based portals. We can use cloud computing. We can benefit from a mobile technology. See, these are all things that supposedly are making our work a little bit easier and allow us to provide better feedback and better support to the countries. So this was just a very brief introduction and work and presentation on the work that we're doing. So thank you for your attention. Welcome again to the NFI Georgian delegation. This is something that you will see if you walk around outside of FAO. Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody, once again. It's a pleasure for me to be here, and I would like just to briefly express my feeling and thanks to our host from FAO, especially Andrei, and as he mentioned, so we have an old friendship starting from Tbilisi, and let me say that he's a man who loves Georgia. Also, special thanks to Marco, who, let's say, organized this training events, and thanks all of team that are engaged in our training process. So as Andrei and Marco mentioned about, so we are here just to have training on open forest issues. Let me once again briefly that in Georgia it's initiated first national forest inventory, which is supported by German government, and accordingly few months ago it was established a new working group which is working on NFI issues, just to implement NFI components. Right now I would like just to briefly introduce our, let's say, activities and job, but of course I would like to touch the main thing and the main issues. That's why the Georgian government, they initiated and requested to implement this project. First national forest inventory process. So of course it's clear, so it's shown in the title of my presentation that we have to see not only trees, but also we have to just open our, let's say, eyes and look what we're seeing behind the trees. What is the picture behind the trees? First of all, I just quickly just would like to go through and show you the brief information about biodiversity of Georgia. Here you see the main figures, what kind of species and biodiversity there is in the country, including percentage and area, forested area in the country. And also just by few words to touch about the management system and structure of authorities, which one is responsible for managing of Georgian forest. So the one unit, one authority, there is policy, biodiversity and Forest Policy Department, which responsible it is just to work on design of forest management policy and strategic system. The next one, there is two authorities which ones are responsible for managing and follow those policy and strategic design which elaborated by Forest Policy Department. There is a National Forestry Agency and Agency of Protected Areas. And of course, logically, there is third one which supervising all of this process described above. And there is Department of Environmental Supervision. Also, just to quickly go through and just complete this page, let me say that also there is governments of Adjara's and Abkhazia's autonomous republic, which also they just managing the forest within this autonomous republic, but unfortunately, and as you are aware about that, Abkhazia Autonomous Republic and South Ossetia, for a while, it's not reachable, and because of political situation, it's not under our control. Also, there is local governing bodies, also Georgia Patriarchy and forest users, which holds the licenses, for managing the forest. Here, just shown the picture of our beautiful environment. And right now, just to move ahead to my main topic of this presentation, there is challenges on which Georgia forest management is facing on. And these, let's say, problems and questions on which government, personally Ministry of Environment, they are focusing and working on. So there is forest, the government and the ministry, they recognize that forest management is one of the most complex sector. Also, in the country, increased demand on the forest resources. It's because of economic and social economic situation in the country. As I mentioned, Georgia faces on some other challenges with the background when the old dated and non-valid forest data exist in Georgia. So let me say briefly that in the country around 20 years, approximately 20 years, maybe more, so did not conducted inventory activities. Accordingly, the main data and main information from the forest is obtained after inventory activities. Thus, we can, let's say that our information and information what we have regarding of the country's forest is very old and not valid. But I would like just to underline that recently, few years ago, National Forest Agency, which is one of the party of managing country's forest, they started step by step to cover Georgian regions in terms of they implement inventory activities. And in close future, hopefully, they will just cover whole country, and also this information will be, it's very crucial to manage Georgian forest on sustainable manner. Also, forest monitoring system does not work properly because there is lack of knowledge, also running process and lack of knowledge regarding the forest development phases. So let me say that also it's another main question and another main problem in the country we are facing on, that there is still lack of knowledge about new updated information and also new ideas and approaches. Also, there is a low scientific potential, and just to move ahead to a bit, just past my presentation, I would like to say that within our project, I mean this NFI project, so we have very close cooperation with scientific institutions and research institutions in terms just to raise their capacities and also to engage their knowledge, what they have in our, let's say, process. Also, reporting mechanism doesn't work properly. So here I would like also to emphasize that Georgia is not, Georgia is not, the ministry is not only have obligation to report the local within the country, but also they have obligation just to report international organizations as well. That's why, because of a lack of and all dated information, sometimes it arises questions which sometimes it's difficult to let's say answer because personally I had touch to these problems when I was focal point of forest resource assessment for 2005 and 10, and when it was requested just to obtain information and data for reporting, so it was very difficult to find the real and valid sources and data. Also, it's a big problem. Accordingly, as a result, Georgia decided to work on the main political documents, and they started the forest sector reform from 2013, and it's continued till nowadays. So here you see some main, let's say, some main documents and some main, let's say, instruments which is already prepared or is under consideration process. So there is first, it's already elaborated national forest concept of Georgia. Also, the next one, as you know, Georgia signed agreement with Europe on free trade agreement. Accordingly, country took obligation to follow this agreement, and this article 233, it says that sustainable management of forest and trade in the forest products, it have to be addressed on the forest, on the development sustainability Georgian forest. Accordingly, the new forest code is already elaborated, and hopefully it will be adopted. It has to be adopted by Parliament, and hopefully it will be done in next year. Of course, another point, it's forest reform strategy, on which also the ministry, they are working on this strategy document. And finally, I would like to say that each document is focused, all of these documents which I just described and talking about, is focused on a sustainable forest management according to forest function. Accordingly, we can get complete and clear picture about forest, about Georgian forest, which will be trustful, and we will get necessary information about. Yes, so it was also, once again, I would like to underline that it was the main idea and main approach. That's why the ministry, on behalf of the government, Georgian government, they started negotiation with German government, and it was requested to implement in country the first national forest inventory. So right here I would like just briefly go through to this project. In the project there is three main components. The first one, there is an implementation of national forest inventory. Next one, improved of existing methodology and system of forest management inventory. And the final stage, there is development of forest information and monitoring system. Also, here I would like to emphasize that this project will help development of institutional and human capacity. Project implementation duration, as you see, there is from 2017 till 2019. Expected outputs of the project. So what the ministry they want, what the ministry wants to have after this project is finalized. Yes, so by the end of 2019, national forest inventory, it will be national forest inventory, it will be carrying out, and in next year, so we plan just to start work on improvement of forest management inventory. And also, as I mentioned, the final stage and phase, there is establishment of FIMS, Forest Information and Management System, in which will be included and gathered all kind of information which will be existed in country level. So there is project main partners, there is some governmental institutions, also there is some research and international institutions as well. Yes, and just to come back and say a few words about the reason of implementation NFI. So there is a first point, improvement of legislation that ensuring the political and strategic decision makers that information which will be obtained will be reliable. Of course, reporting on national, regional, and global level. Also, there is development, as I mentioned, development of research potential, which one of the crucial, from my point of view, problematic and very important issue for the country. And also here I would I would like to underline that NFI results doesn't aim on the on planning of forest management activities at regional or forest district level. As you are aware, it comes information for whole country. Also, there is one of the main issue of our project that we are following. Our working group is following the guideline which is elaborated by FAO. It's a voluntary guideline on national forest monitoring. So there is briefly just information about international organizations to whom we are have to be reporting, and the Georgian Georgian agencies which they expected NFI outputs. So just briefly would like, it's more or less technical issues and questions, but I would like just to brief and very quickly just inform you about the NFI process. There is a NFI cluster and plot design. There is a variables on which we are going to have a survey on simple plots, and the basic expected outputs for Georgia. There is described the main list of outputs that we are going to present after NFI project is complete. So as I mentioned, yes, so accordingly, when in 2019, when we have information listed over here, it helps several institutions and several organizations just to increase their, for example, research activities or even strategic design and policy planning in this term, Ministry of Environment and Nature Resources, Nature Protection Resources. Yes, that's why I mean that there is a very crucial and very important project for us. And finally, once again, I would like to say thanks to our German partners, which they support our project and supporting our project, and as well other partners, including our FAO friends who is engaged in this process, and we hope and we believe in our success, that we will increase capacity and knowledge, also informational, updated information about country's forest. So that's briefly and shortly what I would like to wanted to say, and just to give your information. So thank you for your attention.
Okay, so my name is Ilyas Animon. I'm a forestry officer working in the Forest Economics and Governance team in FAO. So to start with, I really like the way you explained it, because to see behind the trees, so it's actually depending on where we stand, right? So we can see from inside the forest and look outside. So we see people outside. So this is the kind of connection that we are trying to make increasingly, because traditionally what happens is, like, we are all foresters. We measure a lot of trees, animals, all these things. So we have a lot of biophysical data. So increasingly what's happening now, especially after, in recent years, especially after the SOFO 2014, which was about socioeconomic benefits on forests. So we find a lot of gap in the socioeconomic data, which actually is needed to connect the dots, in order to understand what's happening inside the forest. Like Marco listed a few questions, and I see most of them are highly related to the socioeconomic data. So there was a kind of a felt need for this particular data set in the socioeconomic data sets, and it was in 2014 or 15, World Bank, that's a Living Standard Measurement Study Group, and PROFOR, and then IFRI, and then CIFOR, and FAO started a process of developing, we call it forestry modules, and it actually eventually published as a forestry paper. And this is a module that's actually trying to help the countries to collect socioeconomic data at the national level. It can be used at the project level, it can be used at different levels, but this is something which we have been trying to promote in the recent years, and this is already being implemented in Turkey, and I understand that it's being implemented in a few other countries like Argentina, Armenia, and also in Georgia. So I don't know who is implementing that. We need to really find out who is, but it will be a good connection to make.
It's a baseline study.
Yeah. So it's a good connection to make, to understand, like, once we have this whole biophysical data, how we really connect this biophysical data with the socioeconomic data. And also we are trying to implement part of it in Bangladesh. There is a national forest inventory happening in Bangladesh, and there is a separate study on the socioeconomic data collection, and we are trying to use part of this module there as well. And also we are trying to use this part of this module in Trinidad and Tobago at the project level. So I would say, like, we should explore the possibilities to connect the dots, you know, between the biophysical data and socioeconomic data. So we are here to help in the way you want. Thank you.